Okay, so we've solved systems of equations by graphing them. And remember, we graphed them and we saw where the two graphs intersected. But now we're going to solve them algebraically. You guys did this last year with linear equations. Okay, you guys use substitution and elimination. Does that sound familiar to you? Okay, for us, we're going to be using substitution. Okay, that makes this a little bit easier. And it's asking you, where does f of x equal h of x? Okay, so it's basically telling you to set them equal to each other. So here's my f of x. So I have x squared plus x minus 3. And it's going to equal the h of x, which is negative 2x minus 5. Okay, now when we're solving, this is a quadratic because there's a squared variable. Our first step is always to have it set equal to 0. When I set it equal to 0. That means I have to add 2x to both sides. And I'm going to put it right underneath that x because those are like terms. And I'm going to add 5 to both sides. I'm going to put it right next to the negative 3 because those are like terms. So now I get x squared plus 1 and 2 is 3 x's. Negative 3 and 5, they're opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract and get 2. The negative 2 and positive 2 is 0, and negative 5 and positive 5 is also 0. So it's equal to 0 now. Any questions over that? Okay, now this is just a quadratic. Okay, and we need to solve it. Okay, we've learned 3 different ways to solve quadratics. Does anyone remember one way we can solve a quadratic? What? 3 ways we solve quadratics. What? Box, by factoring it. Okay, we can factor it. That's one. What's another one? We sing it. The quadratic formula, and then there's one more. Okay, 4.2. Look at your 4.2 notes and see what its title is. By square rooting. Okay, so this one we can't square root because I have that x squared and the x. Remember, you can only square root when it has just x squared or parentheses squared. Okay, so this one we can either factor it or use the quadratic formula. So would you guys like to factor or use the quadratic formula? Factor. Let's factor this. Let's see if we can factor this. So we're going to do x times x. What multiplies to 2? 2 and 1. That'll give me 2x here, and x times 1 is 1x. If I add them, do I get 3? Yes. Okay, everything's positive. That makes the 1 positive and this 2 positive. So my factors are x plus 1 and x plus 2 equaling 0. Now, x plus 1 might equal 0, and x plus 2 might equal 0. Let's solve. I subtract 1, and I get x equals negative 1. Subtract 2, and I get x equals negative 2. Okay, so f of x equals h of x when x equals negative 1 and negative 2. Any questions over that? Okay, let's try the next one. Same idea, we're looking where f of x equals h of x. So we're going to set them equal to each other. Yeah? Oh, sorry. Okay, and it's going to equal the h of x, which is x plus 7. Same steps. We need it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the x and put it with the like term. And subtract the 7 and put it with the like term. That gives me 2x squared. Negative 3 and negative 1 is negative 4x's. Negative 3 and negative 7, they are the same sign, so I'm going to add and keep the sign. Equals 0. Okay, so I can do either factor it, or I can solve using quadratic formula. Okay. Which would you guys like to do? Someone said box, quadratic. Which one? Box, quadratic. Okay, so we're going to try the box. Write small, guys. Oh, can't they all be divided by 2? Okay, it's divided all by 2. So this becomes x squared, this becomes negative 2x, and this becomes negative 5. So this is x times x. What multiplies to 5? Is that going to work? Is there anything else that multiplies to 5? No. It can't factor. So sad. Okay, that means we have to use the quadratic formula, which is also cool because we get to sing. Yes. Okay. Ready? X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I did not. I stole it from other teachers because that's what we do as teachers. We just steal from people. Okay? Although I wrote these notes, but other teachers use them, so they stole them from me. So we all take from each other. Okay, so a value. Xavier, what's the a value here?
The a value is the 4, negative 2.
Positive 2.
2.
B value. Bingo, what's the B value? Negative 4. And so then the C value is going to be negative 10. And we plug it in. When I plug negative 4 into negative B, it becomes a positive 4. Plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 10 all over 2 times 2. So far, so good. Now just reduce, not reduce, simplify. plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Negative 4 times 2 is 8, negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 10. Okay, is it positive or negative? Positive 80. Make sure you check the sign. That's why I'm always highlighting it and reminding you. Okay, that's where you're going to make the mistake. And it's all over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay. Then we're just going to add those, and we're going to get 4 plus or minus the square root of 96 all over 4. Okay. So f of x equals h of x when x equals 4 plus square root 96 all over 4. And 4 minus the square root of 96 all over 4. I'm going to plug that in my calculator just to see what that is. Oh, there it is. Because that doesn't help me out a lot. And that gives me x equals, or is about, 3.4. And negative 1.4. Any questions on that? We're doing good? Okay, on the back. Okay, we need to deal with our function notation and what all of the little symbols mean. So use the given function to find the missing values. So for A, they ask you to find f of 0. Okay, all that means is that x equals 0. Find y. We're going to plug in 0 for x. So that gives me f of 0 equals 0 squared plus 12 times 0 plus 36. So f of 0 equals 0 plus 0 plus 36. So f of 0 is just 36. Any questions over that? Okay, f of negative 2. Now instead of plugging in 0, we're going to plug in negative 2 for x and solve that. So I'm going to have f of negative 2 equals negative 2 squared plus 12 times negative 2 plus 36. Okay, everyone simplify that for me. Okay, class, what do we get? 16, very good. So let's just review. F of -2 equals -2 squared is 4. 12 times -2 is -24 plus 36. 4 and -24 is -20 plus 36. And then -20 plus 36 is 16. Any questions over that? Okay, now notice the difference between B and C. B is f of -2, and C is f of x equals 0. Find what does x equal? Okay, so this is, now I'm giving you the y value. Y equals 0. Find x. So we're going to take our equation, and instead of plugging it in for x, we're plugging it in for the f of x. So 0 equals x squared plus 12x plus 36. Now that's a quadratic. Okay, remember I have 3 ways of solving quadratics? What are my 3 ways of solving a quadratic? Square rooting, factoring, that's boxes factoring, quadratic formula, get this thing, okay? So what are we gonna do here? You wanna try and factor it? Let's factor. Can it be factored, you guys? Some of you should know already. Okay, so x and x. What multiplies the 36 class? 6 and 6. Okay, so this is 6x, this is 6x. We're gonna add, oopsie. Okay, so I have x plus 6 times x plus 6 and equals 0. That's going to give me x plus 6 equaling 0. Do I really need to do both of them? No, right? Because they're both the same answer. It's going to be -6. Okay, since I only have one x-intercept, what's everyone picture in their head what the graph is going to look like? When I graph this, because I only got one answer, one x-intercept, can anyone describe what the graph would look like? Very good. Since I only got one solution to my equation, it'll be like this. My vertex will be on the x-axis. Any questions over that? Okay, next one. Now we're going to find f of x equals 4. So now I'm plugging in 4 for f of x. X squared plus 12x plus 36. Okay, in your pairs, solve that. Okay, but first you need to make it equal to 0. So you have to subtract that 4. 4 and 36 are like terms. So you have 0 equals x squared plus 12x plus 36. I will factor it, and then I will show you the quadratic formula, seeing as though a lot of you guys tried the quadratic formula. It will work. It just takes more work. Oopsie, I didn't subtract it, did I? 36 minus 4 is 32, not 36. Now you factor x and x. What multiplies to 32? 8 and 4, good. everything's positive. So this is positive and this is positive. That means I get x plus 4 equaling 0 and x plus 8 equaling 0. Back to 4 minus the 8. And I get x equals negative 4 and negative 8. Okay, so now if you did the quadratic formula, most of you guys got negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 2. Did most of you get that far? Okay, what's the square root of 16? 4. Once you take the square root, it doesn't need a radical anymore. A lot of you guys put it back in the radical. Doesn't need that. So then you're separating. And you're going to get 12 plus 4 all over 2. And 12 minus 4 all over 2. 12 plus 4 is 16. 12 minus 4 is 8. Oh, I dropped the negative, sorry. Let's try that again. Okay. So negative 12 plus 4 is negative 8 over 2. And then negative 12 and negative 4 is negative 16 over 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4, and negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. Any questions over that? We got it? Okay, next one. Yay! We won't do all the examples here. I see some of you are fading. But I want to just, because it is different. Okay, the ones we've just did, I gave you the equation in standard form. This one I gave you the equation in vertex form. So I want to make sure you know how to plug in numbers for that and remind you how to solve it as well. Okay, so this is still f of 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. So x equals 0, find y. And this should be g of x. I changed my variable by accident. Okay, so we're going to have g of 0 equals 0 plus 3, the whole thing, squared, plus 6. Then 0 plus 3 is 3 squared plus 6. Three squared then is 9 plus 6 is 15. So g of 0 is 15. We're not going to do B because B is the same thing. I just want to make sure you can do that. Let's go to C. Okay, so for C, I'm plugging in 0 for the y value, for the f of x. So it's going to be 0 equals x plus 3 squared plus 6. Okay, there's only one way to solve this equation. Okay, any ideas on how I'm going to solve this? Can I factor it? Okay, use the quadratic formula. What's my only other way of solving a quadratic? Square rooting. Okay, I can't, well, I shouldn't say I can't. I shouldn't try and factor this because it's already factored pretty much. Okay. And I'd have to multiply this out and put it in standard form before I could ever factor it. That's the same thing if I wanted to use the quadratic formula. I'd have to multiply this out and then add 6 to try to use the quadratic formula and find A, B, and C. So the easiest way to solve this is by square rooting it. So we're going to isolate the thing that is squared. I need to get rid of that 6 then. So how do I do that? Subtract it. That's going to give me negative 6 equals x plus 3, the whole thing squared. Now I can square root this. When I square root the squared thing, it just becomes x plus 3. The square root of negative 6, it's going to have an I. It's imaginary. So it's I square root 6 and negative I square root 6. It needs both. Now I have to subtract 3. This becomes negative 3 plus I square root 6 and negative 3 minus I square root 6. And that's what x equals. Okay, now try and picture the graph in your head. Since my answers are complex, what would the graph kind of look like? Any ideas on what my graph should look like? Yeah.
Too complex.
Yes, but what would the graph look like since there's 2 complex answers? Yeah? No x-intercepts. It's not going to cross the x-axis. So if I were to graph it, I know my vertex is at negative 3 and 6. So it'd be over here somewhere. And the parabola would face up. Okay, it would never cross the x-axis. Any questions over that? Okay, your homework.